Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our meeting of Monday, October 25th. To start out our meeting, I am going to call upon Howard to introduce our guest speaker today. Howard.
Thanks, Don. Our speaker today was born in Lebanon and fleeing the civil war with his family, immigrating to London in 1988. Adam has a degree in political science from Western University and an MBA from Manchester Business School in the UK. He has been working in the banking industry for more than 20 years, both in Canada and in the Middle East. He's a professor of business at Fanshawe College. And Adam is a community activist with a passion for politics and Western political philosophy. He has given multiple talks on Middle Eastern politics and religious radicalization. Adam's topic today, which may be a surprise to those who were in the break room talking about mortgage and housing, his topic today is instead the root causes of the rise of Islamophobia, with an emphasis on immigration, integration, and possible remedies. So please join me in welcoming Adam Benni.
Thank you, Howard, for the kind introduction. I'm very ecstatic and happy to have this session with you today. Thank you. I really want to thank the Rotary Club and all of the administration and Don and Malcolm for inviting me to talk about an important issue that I would say that it is and definitely it is important. It has always been an important topic and issue. We've all have heard or experienced the issue of Islamophobia. Particularly, it has become even more important topic, given the incident that happened in London, Ontario, the massacre of 4 individuals. Those individuals, as you all know, they were massacred simply because of who they were, because they belong to a specific religion. And this issue is not going to go away. We were just in a chat room. We were talking about housing affordability, and we're talking about immigration. You know what? As Canada grow, as we grow in numbers, and as we bring in immigrants from all across the world, politics and geopolitical issues that happen outside of Canada, I mean, in the Far East or the Middle East, unfortunately, is going to affect us here in Canada. We're living in a global village age, and the world is becoming smaller and smaller. There's a lot more interactions, and we can't live in isolation anymore. And whatever happens over there, we should not just assume that as long as it's there, it will never affect us. And so today's topic, and I hope that the objective of today's talk is to define Islamophobia. There's a lot of different questions about what is Islamophobia, and a lot of disagreement about the terminology. What are the factors that is enabling Islamophobia? I will also proceed to talk very briefly about the differences between Islam and political Islamism. So there is a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of gray area, and giving the and since 9/11, the understanding of Islam has been blurred. And the difference between Islam and Islamism has been blurred, and I hope that I can be able to clarify both what is Islam and political Islam, because it's extremely important, so we can be able to, when we make a decision and try to understand the nature of the problem, so we can be able to understand it properly. This is a very complex problem. We cannot analyze it and come to a conclusion in a very simplistic way. It is extremely complex, and I hope that in my 25 minutes, I can be able to explain the nature of the problem, analyze it, and hopefully come up with some kind of recommendations and remedies, right? Again, I only have 25 minutes, so I'm going to jump into it if I may. And I need to apologize in advance that if I do rush, because again, we are like 5 minutes here into the presentation, so I will proceed from here. Yeah, so let me proceed here. Again, why are we talking about this subject today? Like, why do we care? And do we need to care? I've listed here a little bit of, so there are certain incidents that happen in Canada. For the last incident against, if we call it Islamophobic incident, that is basically, and I will define Islamophobia with the terminology. So there has been an attack on a Muslim family in London, Ontario. 4 people were killed, and another person is still in the hospital. I think he's getting better. He's a little child. And you guys know the nature of the problem and the incident. Prior to that, in 2017, there was an attack on 6 worshippers at a mosque in Montreal. Many mosques in Canada or places of worship in Canada has been vandalized, or even workers have been attacked or stabbed. And then most importantly, we have been a rise in attacks on hijabi women. So these are Muslim women who wear the scarf. So a lot of incidents where, you know what, they've been attacked, their hijab or their scarf has been pulled by force. So there is a rise that is increasing, and you know what, we need to do something about it. We cannot just continue and sit down and not recognize that there is a problem. And hopefully in my presentation today, I can be able to explain it, and hopefully we'll have a Q&A at the end. So there has been a lot of a study about Islamophobia. So as you can see here, there has been a poll was done by Ipsos Reid or Global News, and they have asked Canadians from all walks of life, whether they're on the left or on the right, whether you're liberal, NDP, conservative, what have you. So I would say on average 57% of Canadians do agree that there is a rise in Islamophobia, or hatred against Muslims in general. That's sort of the definition of Islamophobia. And on the other side, obviously there are those Canadians who disagree, and you can see that who do they belong to, right? But definitely I would say between 57 and 60% of Canadians, they do agree that there is a problem vis-a-vis the Muslim community in Canada, and that there is hatred going on in here. I will extend it further here. The same study that was done back in 2019, I can tell you that has gone up in numbers. So the question, so basically they came up with a conclusion is that 1 in 4 Canadians say that it's becoming more acceptable to be prejudiced against Muslims. So this is a very, very worrying trend. So what they've done is they've asked Canadians from all walks of life, and based on their perception of Muslims in Canada, they kind of say, well, you know what, yeah, Muslims are facing racism or prejudice, and it is understandable, and it is kind of okay. So in a sense that it is understandable why they're facing, and that is a very problematic trend. So you can see on the top here, so 26% of Muslims or Arabs do face racism, and it's acceptable, and it's becoming more acceptable, it's becoming more of a norm. Immigrants, 23% of immigrants, face also, some type of prejudice as well. 21% of refugees face some type of racism. 15% of Jews, I mean, I'm shocked to see that number that is still happening. They're also facing anti-Semitic, hate crime. It goes down to Aboriginal, 13%, Asians in general, like that would be your Chinese and Koreans, Blacks, 12%, and then at the end you have the Hispanics. So there is a problem of prejudice, and you call it, xenophobia, or call it some type of prejudice or racism. But as you can see, that the Muslim population is on the top of the chart, right? Here I'm going to actually share with you a video. So as a result of this study that was done by Ipsos Reid, I would like to share with you a sort of analysis of that report by Global News, and I hope I can be able to.
The troubling problem of Islamophobia in Canada. For example, our survey found that while Canadians believe in the protection of religious rights generally, they are less concerned for the religious rights of their Muslim co-citizens. For example, 82% of Canadians give importance to religious freedom generally, but only 68% of Canadians give importance to the protection of the rights of Muslims to practice their religion. Our survey also found that Canadians are more likely to harbor negative stereotypes about Muslim Canadians than about Christian or Jewish Canadians. In a question polling for general attitudes toward different religious groups, we found that Canadians consider Muslims markedly less tolerant, less adaptable, less open-minded, more violent, and more oppressive of women than Christian or Jews.
So as we can see that, a lot of studies have been done and a lot of research have been done, and definitely there is, as we can see, there is a rise of anti-Muslim hate. So, I mean, what is Islamophobia, right? So there has been a lot of debate about it. In a simple term, Islamophobia is basically anti-Muslim racism. That's pretty much. So when we look at anti-Jewish racism, we've identified that as anti-Semitism. In the case of the Muslims, we call it Islamophobia. That's just as simple as that. And phobia means that also that we are. It comes from the word phobia, means it's when an individual doesn't understand the other. It's basically that they are worried about the presence of a certain individual because of who they are, because of their skin color, and so on and so forth. So it obviously leads to racism and prejudice. That's basically in a nutshell. So I hope that by this presentation, I'm going to talk about, okay, so what are the reasons for the rise of Islamophobia? Before I talk about this, what you're going to hear from me is you're not going to hear that from the media, right? I know in no shape and form believe that Canada has a systemic racism issue. This is a very complex problem, and I'm going to actually analyze it. I've dissected the causes. I'm going to go over the media, Hollywood, obviously, books and academia. Western government foreign policy is a big contributor to what's happening, in addition to Orientalism, and I'll explain it. But in the big box in the bottom, as you can see, political Islamism, because I do believe that there is a problem here when it comes to Muslims in general, and that is the radicalization of Islam all over the globe, and hence it is contributing also to the rise of Islamophobia. So. So basically, who is the Islamophobic? What is the mindset of an Islamophobic individual? Where first of all, they basically think that all Muslims are monolithic. They all believe and act in the same way. And if we see certain individuals, for example, who have committed acts of terrorism somewhere in the name of Islam, and then we'll talk about that. Therefore, all Muslims are terrorists, right? So they become wary of Muslims, and they become mistrustful of Muslims in general, right? They view Muslims as the other, that we have nothing in common between us, between Muslims and non-Muslims. They view Muslims as inferior to Western values. They're barbaric, irrational, primitive, or sexist, or even more. They're violent, aggressive, and engaged in clash of civilization. So that's basically the framework. I always say the common theme that an Islamophobic individual of Islamic. But what leads to that kind of perception? First of all, let's talk about Orientalism. Orientalism is the study. It was a European academia who studied the Orient, and the Orient includes obviously Muslims, but it also includes Asians, Far East Asians, and anybody who's basically not a European. So a lot of attempt has happened historically by Orientalists, to study the cultures, the philosophy, and the religions of non-Europeans. And they came up with their own kind of conclusions, but those conclusions also include biases, right? So in their observation, specifically when it comes to Muslim societies, they concluded that they are inferior to the West, they're sexist, misogynist, and violent. So an individuals who goes to a university or studies history or religion, they come across a lot of this sort of narrative that's being constructed by Orientalism, and this sort of adds to the bias that we have, right? So that's one. I would say that this is one factor as why we don't understand why we view Muslims and Islam in a specific way. What about the media? The media, as you guys know, media sells bad news. It never sells good news, and that's how they get their rating. Whenever you see images or videos or presentations about Muslims, it's always negative. It's always about war. It's always about terrorism. So it kind of reinforces this view that Muslims are violent, and that their societies are actually violent in such a way, and that there's always a problem. So that adds to the perception of Muslims. Now, what about Hollywood? A lot of studies have been done. So I'm sure you have come across, cartoons and movies and that sort of portrays, Arabs and Muslims again as the bad villain, or maybe as violent or sexist or misogynist or whatever it is, right? And they're viewed as basically public number one. So this has increased also more post 9/11, because 9/11 was a key incident that happened that led to this types of perception. So again, and then you have literature, general literature and websites that basically also portray Islam and Muslims in a very negative way. There is actually a systemic attempt, to also demonize Islam and Muslims for specific agendas. And I've listed, some of them in here. And unfortunately, you have individuals who basically learn about Islam and Muslims just by going in social media or going to YouTube, and now all of a sudden they're expert, on Islam and the complexity of Islam and the history of Islam and Muslims, right? So we need to be aware of that as well. And then you have the Islamophobia industry. So so there are organizations who are very well funded, who are, again, because of certain agenda that they have, they continually present Islam and Muslims in a very negative way. So we as Western become more fearful of them, and that's what's creating to the sort of the Islamophobic mentality. I've showed you a couple of pictures. I mean, if you go online right now, a lot of the mosques will be vandalized, as you can see here in this case. It say it says go home. 9/11. You're a murderer. So a lot of these attacks have happened. Like it's happening always. It happened in the States, in Canada, in Europe, you name it. So this is the kind of things that we do. But you can see again a reference to 9/11. So that is September 11. A lot of the again, when you go online, there's just another reference to Muslim women who are making babies, and eventually they're like taking time bombs, right? Another picture that you see on the bottom right hand side about what is Islam. Islam is basically, it's a crime against women. So a lot of those types of narrative. So a lot of books have been written on this, and it is circulating in the media. And again, it reinforces our misunderstanding about Islam and Muslims in general. So, and then we also have policies, right? We have politicians who use fear tactics in order to galvanize and in order to mobilize, voters to vote for them. It's a very powerful tool. I mean, this tool is used, using, hate and making the public fearful of a certain enemy will hopefully mobilize voters to vote for that particular person. And this is a common political practice all across the globe, but in this case it has been happening in the States and in Canada as well. So in Canada, let's talk about Canada here. For example, there has been a policy about you probably heard about the Muslim ban, where certain Muslims were not allowed to come from certain countries. Now, again, there are rationale behind it. You know what? We as a country, we in a certain time where during the heights of terrorism, our government had to act in the name of security and so on and so forth. But then the way it has done it, it has actually sort of created that perception, reinforced that perception that, you can never trust Muslim, immigrants to come to this country. So, for example, the second one, which is called the Barbaric Practice Hotline, during the federal election in 2015, this was adopted by the government who was then back then, and then they basically introduced it, supposedly someone gave them the advice that, if you introduce a barbaric hotline, meaning that, if I suspect someone of being a terrorist, I can just pick up that phone, call and say, hey, RCMP and CSIS, come pick up this guy because I think he's a terrorist. That created a lot of problems because, again, who am I to judge, that person, whether they're suspected, terrorists and what have you. It has even created even more mistrust against Muslims. And in the back of in our minds of Canadians, we are becoming even more suspicious of Muslims, and hence and then for certain individuals, they go as far as becoming more anti-Muslim rhetoric, right? So that's actually another reason for that. A lot of Muslims have been wrongly treated in a no-fly zone list because of maybe their name, is closer to a certain individuals who's been sort of monitored by security people. So a lot of them have been, if they travel, they cannot travel, or if they are there and they do enhanced screening. So a lot of these issues have happened, and that sort of kind of again reinforced, the anti-Muslim sentiment as well. So what is the problem here? The problem here is that there is an ignorance of Islam and Muslims, right? There's definitely an ignorance, and here's what it is. First and foremost, there is 1.8 billion Muslims all across the world. They are there, again, when I say 1.8 billion Muslims, it will be crazy for any one of us to think that all 1.8 billion Muslims will think and act and behave in the same way. They come from different economic backgrounds. And by the way, when we talk about Islam, Islam is like Christianity. There are many different denominations. There are many different, there are those who are ultra-conservative, those who are kind of moderate, and those who are on the left. We have Muslims who are atheists, right? There are those who are liberal, and those who basically practice Islam, and those who don't practice Islam. We have Muslims Muslim women who wear the scarf. It's a traditional scarf, and there are Muslim women who don't even believe that the scarf is Islamic, right? And so there is actually a diversity of opinion about what is Islam, first of all, and how can a Muslim practice Islam. There's extreme diversity, and what has happened, and because of all the reasons that I've listed, we as Canadians here, we have built this perception that there's only one Islam, and then there's only one way of, and there's only particular individuals who follow Islam in the exact same way, right? So again, there's a lot of diversity among Muslims. I've put a picture in here. As you can see, there's a brown skin, there are blacks who are Muslims, there are white skins as well with blue eyes and green eyes. They are extremely diverse in terms of who they are and their background, right? So the perception that the Muslims come only from a specific background, they have one specific skin color, it kind of add to that sort of a misunderstanding about Muslims, right? So it is extremely important. And by the way, whatever I'm telling you here is the exact same discourse that is happening in the Middle East and across the Islamic, I would say Islamic world or countries. There is a definite distinction between the religion of Islam and Islamism. So the problem here is that this definition and the lines have been blurred. So Islam is basically just a set of values, and whereas Islamism is think of it as more of a political ideology. And if I may go further, I mean, basically, you may want to question, well, what is Islam? Well, Islam is basically comes from the word peace, salam, and is basically peace through following God. That's it. That's in a nutshell what Islam is, right? And Muslims are basically the ones who follow Islam. There are 5 pillars of Islam. Basically, a Muslim would have to do declare that there's one God. They have to pray 5 times a day. They have to fast the month of Ramadan for 30 days. They have to do pilgrimage once a year, and they have to give charity and alms, which is 2.5% of their wealth. That's it. These are the pillars of Islam. As you can see, there isn't a 6th pillar called terrorism, right? There isn't. So what is happening here? The problem is right now that we see, which kind of enhances also the mistrust of Islam and Muslims, is political Islamism. That is the main problem. If any one of us here trying to understand what the heck is going on in the Middle East and what is happening in Europe and all of these attacks that happen, please note that Muslims back over there are fighting the same battle as we are fighting here today. They are fighting and they're dying, and they're also trying to defeat that enemy that is called political Islamism or radicalism. So what has happened basically is that you had a group of Muslims who have grievances against, I would say, politically against colonization in the past. So I'm going to talk more about it here. So for example, with the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, it has created some type of like a backlash or some type of resentment against, Western powers. In the case of Iraq, for example, we went in and we destroyed the central government. And there was no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. There was no link to Al-Qaeda. Yet, this is a country of 18 million people, and there was a complete power vacuum, and those Islamists and those political organizations took over the political vacuum and engaged in what we call, jihad or global terrorism. In their mind, basically, they assume a more or less a single and literal interpretation of Islam as a political creed. So they view Islam as a political ideology, not as a set of moral beliefs, but as a political ideology, and that their existence on this planet is to simply establish God's rule, right? And better and solve the problem of economic and political problems, by establishing al-Khilafah, the caliphate. The caliphate is basically just another, it's a Muslim empire. At one point in time, there was something called the Islamic Empire. It is medieval, right? So they're going back to the past. And they're saying, we need to go back to the past and use yesterday's, solutions in order to solve today's problems. Obviously, that doesn't work. We've seen the end result, and the end result was ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and that also has exacerbated the notion that Islam is a violent religion, and it has increased the mistrust of Islam. And this is what they want. I have a picture here about what they imagine as the caliphate. So you can see it's at one point in time, there was such a thing as Islamic Empire, and it's a vast area, and this is what they're trying to reestablish. So what is the proper? So what should we do about it as Canadian? Well, here's the thing: both of us who are on the left and on the right have an issue in trying to understand Islam. I hope I've explained that. And again, if there's a Q&A, I can certainly elaborate further. But we need to also separate between Islam as an ideology, as a political philosophy, and Muslims as individuals. Ideas don't have rights. All of us can sit down here. We have the right. We live in a country that advocates free speech and criticism, a rational criticism and respectful criticism, right? Freedom of speech is the bedrock and the cornerstone of Western civilization. We have to keep it, we have to maintain it, but we also want to make sure that we are not also overstepping and turning free speech into hate speech. Both the left and the right got it wrong when it comes to Islam and Muslims. On the left, people say that if you have any criticism against Islam, then you are a bigot and you are a racist against all Muslims, right? Whereas on the right, they also got it wrong. And people on the right say that there are problems, if there are problems, and they've identified problems within, let's say, Islamic scripture or maybe certain Islamic practices. So everyone who is a Muslim must be banned or profiled or demonized. And that is a problem as well, right? And again, I put a quote in the bottom, said ideas have no rights, ideologies have no rights, philosophies have no rights. We can criticize it night and day, but humans, including Muslims, do. And I hope I've also, from my discussion, I have clarified that not all Muslims think and act and follow Islam in the same way. There's a huge diversity about what is Islam and how to follow Islam. And we need to start, whenever we implement certain policies, we need to be aware of that distinction, right? Hate speech is not free speech. I'm going to actually skip that. So so I'm going to end it. So one of the best thing to do, guys, is that, so what can we do? I don't expect us as normal Canadians to go and do the research and study Islam and all that. But you know what? The best thing to do is to have discussions. Let's have the discussions with Muslims. Mosques here in London they always have an outreach. They're always reaching out to churches and synagogues. They have multi-faith dialogue and all that. I think with more dialogue, we can be able to understand each other and understand the other Canadians, because they're not really other. We're just simply Canadians. I will end it with this right now. I will keep it for Q&A. I've actually, again, because of lack of time, if any one of you do want to, you have more questions and we don't have time, please email me or even call me on my cell phone. And we'll leave you with a quote by Averroes. Averroes is if anybody who have studied philosophy, his Arabic name is Ibn Sina, but his Latin name is Averroes. He said, ignorance leads to fear, fear leads to hate, and hate leads to violence. And this is the equation. And this applies to all of us as humans. And this is the motto that I believe that we should follow, and so we can have a better humanity here. And I ended with that.
Wonderful, thank you. We will open it for question and answer now. If you do have a question for Adam, please use the reactions button in Zoom and raise your hand, and I will try to recognize everyone when they have a question.
I have one. You kind of moved over it quickly, Adam, and it was the Bill 21 in Quebec and ramifications of that. So has that led to an exodus of Muslims from Quebec?
Well, I mean, yeah, the bill basically it was introduced in Quebec for individuals not to wear religious symbols in public institutions. So it has affected more, I would say, Muslim women who wear the hijab, and it has kind of created even more distrust of Muslims, because it kind of, we see when government makes a policy, again, I understand the nature of Quebec and their staunch support of secularism and the complete separation between, religion and states and all that. We understand the background and, the French Revolution and all that. And so Quebec is kind of like unique in its own application of secularism, secular values. But again, so here's the thing: what do we do? How do we create policies that maintain secularism while we're not sort of creating additional bias against a certain segment of society? So it is an ongoing problem. They have gone to the courts and still battling that decision, and it's still happening. So,
thanks.
You're welcome.
Adam, I think the quote on your last slide was ignorance leads to fear, fear leads to hate.
Yeah.
So one of the challenges that we have in Canada is the ignorance. That's where things kind of start. And when there are new immigrants that come to Canada and they live in a community, how do Canadians, or what is the best way for people to build up a knowledge, to an understanding of that new community that's all of a sudden there, that they've never been exposed to before? And if you're 40, 50, 60 years old and you've never been exposed to a Muslim before in your life, I think it's natural to be afraid of the unknown.
Yes, absolutely.
How do we best address that so that people aren't afraid?
We need to be Rotarians. So this is exactly what you guys are doing here. I mean, what is the work that you guys are doing? I mean, you're not just involved in London, Ontario. You're doing amazing work in Canada and across the globe and all that. So we need to have venues and dialogues and discussions and so we can be able to understand. I mean, as we grow as Canadian, right? We're bringing, so in the past, most immigrants used to come from kind of like from European background, right? So Europeans have a lot of similar values. They're Christians and they have Judeo-Christian and secular values, and they're very similar. So there's not really that much of an effort for you to try to get to know the others. Although some of them did face backlash, like the Italians and the Irish. They did go through that kind of sort of mistrust, but it's a lot easier because, again, you have the same religious background, same values. But then what if you have immigrants now, they're growing in numbers from different cultures and very different cultures. And that doesn't mean that cultures are, and by the way, cultures are not the same. So there are different. So what are we doing here in Canada to make sure that, when we bring in immigrants into Canada, they could be Hindus, they could be Indians, they could be Chinese, they could be Muslims. I mean, it's not just the Muslims. Today, the problem is maybe we talk about Islamophobia, but then maybe later on we might talk about, I don't know, Hinduphobia or something like that. We don't know. So my belief as a Canadian, so when we came to Canada, I made it an effort for me to understand what makes Canada ticks. I went to university and I studied, Western political philosophy because I want to understand and grasp and make, this is my home, make Canada and Western value as part of my DNA. So not everybody has that luxury to do it. So perhaps when Canadians come here, maybe the Canada should have, or maybe the government should have some type of, events where we can share, talk about different values, right? So we can be able to say, oh yeah, we do have a lot of things in common. And we do, by the way, guys. And here's the thing. Anybody, it doesn't matter. Humans are humans. Yeah, we have different cultures and different practices, but at the end of the day, we have a lot more in common. Let's have a mechanism or a solution where we can talk about what is mostly in common and what divides us, right? And so I think that's a part of it is having this type of conversation. So thank you for inviting me. This is exactly what we need. We need more of this talk. So,
Don, I have a question.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so just a little background. Back in 1970, my mother founded the Children's International Learning Center in Hamilton, which was an effort to add extracurricular activities to young children, basically grade 3 to grade 8, but it expanded into high school age kids as well. And the idea was to educate kids about other cultures, other religions, through displays, interactive conversation, film, etc. That was a really good approach and got a lot of support community-wide. But what my question is, what do you see as a solution or contributing to a solution to the Islamophobia and other phobias relating to a religion that we have in present day society, where we can go into the schools and talk to kids at an age when they're most impressionable to get them to have a broader perspective and a broader understanding? What needs to be done in the education system?
Yeah, I mean, this is one great effort that is going on, and I know that leaders from the Muslim community in London are already working on having some type of like a talk, like we're doing, but for schools, right? For kids in school, so they can learn more. Because what's happening right now in the age of the social media and YouTube, a lot of us are learning about Islam. I did put like a picture about an individual who said, they just went on YouTube. He watched I don't know, a 1 hour segment. All of a sudden now they're expert on Islam, right? So yeah, I mean, if I need to learn about Christianity and Judaism, right, I will go to a priest and I will go to a rabbi so I can understand. Please tell me about what Christ stands for, and what Moses stands for, and we go to the source. So it has to be the same thing. I mean, let's go to the source and let's have more discussions. And yeah, so in terms of public education, all that, this is a great effort that's been done. So we need to have maybe more talk about, what Islam is, what really Islam is, and then basically talk about, and then in the general public, and maybe and we talk about the media as well. Maybe is the media, why do they only cover negative aspect of certain of Islam or Muslims, but then they don't talk about the abundance of positivity that is happening in there, like, right? So it's there, it does exist, but the more you see of negative perception about Islam and Muslims, we need to have a balanced approach. I'm not saying eliminate it. If there's a problem, let's talk about it. But if there's also good and positive aspect about Islam and Muslims, let's also talk about that as well. So, and that's how it all comes back to education, right? So how do we eliminate ignorance? It's about having those types of discussions whenever there's an opportunity to have more of those types of opportunities.
Well, thank you. So Adam,
yes,
the Rotary Club of London would like to recognize your presentation today. And in recognition, a contribution has been made to the Polio Plus campaign of the Rotary Foundation to immunize 50 infants against polio. Because of you, Rotary is now one step closer to a polio-free world. And we'd love to have you come back every Monday at right around noon or shortly before noon and take part in conversations with Rotarians and educate us. It's a great opportunity if you have free time on Mondays to join us and become a Rotarian and become part of the club if you're interested. But it was a great presentation today, very timely, very enlightening. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Don, and thank you for everyone for inviting me. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
So a quick reminder for everyone, yesterday was World Polio Day. And as I think most of you are aware, when Rotary started the campaign to eradicate polio back in 1985, there was 350,000 cases of polio across 125 countries every year. We now have reached 2021, and we are down to 2 cases in 2 countries, 1 case in Afghanistan, 1 case in Pakistan. So we are very, very close to eradicating polio in the world. And because it's World Polio Day, we're looking for contributions to the Rodeo Polio Fund, and you can make a contribution using the endpolio.org/donate website. Any contributions you make will be matched 2 to 1 by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So for every $1 you put in, $3 will go to polio eradication. And as a Rotarian, if you log in using your Rotary user ID, it will also count towards Paul Harris credit. So just a reminder that you still can do that contribution up until the end of the year. So thank you for doing that. And Adam, I forgot to mention, if you have to go, if you have anything else going on, please feel free to leave at this time. Otherwise, you are welcome to stick around for the next 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Is past President Diane here? I didn't see her join, but maybe not. So just a quick reminder, the nomination process is open for the Honorable Ray Lawson Rotarian of the Year Award. It's open to all members of the club except for last year's board of directors and previous recipients of the Rotarian of the Year Award. The nomination form is on the website, and when you've filled out the form, please send it to past President Diane. Are there any other Rotary announcements? I don't have many today, but I'm assuming others do. Yes, Lori.
Just wanted to say thank you to everyone who picked up their tulips on Friday and Saturday last week. I think pretty much everybody picked them up. We do have a couple of Rotarians, however, that have elected to donate their boxes of tulips. So if anybody is looking for a few additional last-minute boxes of tulips, please let Sandy know right away. And you'll all be happy to know, because of the sale of the tulips, our club is donating just over $1,400 towards the Polio Plus campaign, and that is coming from the sale of those tulips. So hopefully everybody had a beautiful weekend to plant their tulips, and will enjoy them next spring. Thanks for your support.
Are there any other announcements? So for Jim Swan, who is unable to join us today, he did send an email about the Salvation Army kettles. I believe he is still looking for a few people to help man the kettles at Christmas time. So you'll just need to reach out to Jim and sign up for any of the open slots. A few reminders about what is upcoming for the club. As always, we have our cocktail hour tomorrow afternoon at 5 p.m. We have coffee clutches on Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Next week's meeting, we will have Franz Koch talking to us about small modular reactors and the future of nuclear power. The week after that will be our Remembrance Day speaker. The Satellite Club meeting on November 2nd will be their new member, Sahar, and doing her About Me chat. So that will be another interesting one. Sahar is quite interesting if you have had a chance to meet her and talk to her already. And our board meeting, which isn't near as interesting, will be Wednesday, November 17th at 5 p.m. And that is everything for our meeting today. A reminder, our theme this year is to serve to change lives. And I hope everyone has an opportunity to serve this week. Thank you very much.